This video is called Operation Rosa Parks. I'm sure you know the story. Well, here's her mugshot when she was arrested. And she was apparently 15 years old, and she was found guilty because she refused to get to the back of the bus. Civil disobedience. And I'm going to borrow that phrase. I'm going to present an argument that I think is valid, and if I'd write a letter to Department of Transportation explaining the errors of their way, they're going to ignore me. And if I would file like a class action, well, I'm outnumbered both in manpower and monetary resources. Department of Transportation has an army of lawyers. They'd bury me in paperwork. And it would be a war of attrition. The old standby is they want to wear you out financially, physically, and emotionally. I mention this because sometimes civil disobedience is necessary. Like I said, I use that word as that phrase for convenience. Now, I enlisted during the Vietnam era. After 7 years, I received my honorable discharge. But there was young boys of my generation that were burning their draft cards in protest of the war. Well, maybe it's time to do the same with the so-called registration credential, because things are out of hand. I want to focus on what everybody knows as a pickup truck. Now, there's all kinds of ways to classify vehicles. But what PennDOT has done, they have took pieces of this formula and that formula, mixed them all together because they wanted to maximize revenue. And a pickup truck is classified as a commercial vehicle. And then if you're going to get a pickup truck and just want to use it for basic travel, well, you're penalized. You have to get the commercial plate for the higher feet, and it says truck. Well, what is a truck? This is the plate that would go on a pickup truck. The word truck has nothing to do with a pickup. The word truck pertains to function. The word truck came from the hand truck that was used at the loading dock. Any device can become a truck if it's used for commercial purposes. Now, what I find is unfair. Here's one example. If you're going to run a business, driver education, you can buy a sedan. For most people, this would be a family car. But if you identify it as a commercial vehicle, a marked vessel, driver education, but then all you need is the standard issued plate on the back at the cheaper rate. Also, let's take there's a Papa John's delivery person. Apparently he's an employee, has the Papa John logo. He's carrying commerce, he's delivering pizza as freight. But these part-time employees, they can use their private vehicle for making deliveries, but what happens when they put that Papa John's logo on the roof, they've just turned this into a commercial vehicle. But yet they only have the basic issue plate in the back. Also, now here's a Domino's, where they take a SUV, a little mini SUV, and they have an oven. They're delivering freight, cargo, pizzas. And the big corporations, they can get away with just using a standard issue plate. But this is a commercial vehicle. It's a marked vessel. So we have contradictions here. So why is it that the pickup truck has been branded or stigmatized as a commercial vehicle? Now, I have to say that most of these pickup trucks are not used for commercial purposes. They're just used for basic travel. I mean, the Department of Transportation's so-called logic doesn't make sense, because if you have a short bed pickup truck, I mean, some of them now have with the extended cab. With a short bed, well, if you had a full-size minivan, I mean, you could haul more in a minivan than you can in a pickup truck. Now, when it comes to classifying a vehicle, now here we can classify by body style: sedans, SUVs, minivans, and so on. Now, one time there was a class called a business coupe, and some of them, either there was no back seat or the back seat folded down, so when you opened the trunk you had a big you had more space, like if you're a salesman, traveling salesman, to carry stuff. That was like the predecessor of the minivan or station wagon. Now, any one of these vehicles could be used for commercial purposes: taxi, police cruiser, code enforcement officer. So it's the plate that reclassifies the vehicle concerning its function or purpose. So let's take here. Now, someone could buy a pickup truck. Now, here it is, truck identified for commercial purposes. And in this case here, then rightfully it would have the truck plate on the back for the higher fee. But I'm going to go one step further. As I will explain, that every vehicle should have a standard issued plate, the same plate, and then if a vehicle is going to be used for commercial purposes, then it gets a DOT number, and like if it's going to be a taxi, then it'll have like a prefix TX or something like that. Continuing. Now, in Pennsylvania, this is the plate used for like a police cruiser. And police cruisers are usually a sedan, or what's trending today in Pennsylvania is the SUV. And once this plate is placed on the vehicle, any other classification becomes irrelevant. The vehicle is now a marked vessel as a commercial vehicle. That's what official use means. It's for commercial use, but limited for government purposes. But it's still, this is a commercial plate. Take the local municipality. Now, if the code enforcement officer is issued a vehicle, it could be a sedan, minivan, but once this plate is put on the vehicle, no matter what it is, it becomes a commercial vehicle. Now, usually a code enforcement officer is going to be a marked vessel. It's going to have, like say, code enforcement, for whatever municipality. But this is a commercial plate. There's all kinds of commercial plates. We have, there's a dealer plate. A sub-classification of would be a classic car. Now, concerning classifications, I mean, you could classify them several different ways. Design, weight class, gross weight, its status. You have a commercial classification. All commercial vehicles are trucks, because that's the generic word they selected. But then there's subclassifications. You could have a limo, a taxi, an ambulance, emergency vehicle. Well, a limousine, taxi, and an ambulance, their cargo or freight is people. If you go into a taxi, then you're a passenger, because you're paying for passage. So at that point, you're freight or cargo and being transported to a destination. So a commercial vehicle is a truck, but any vehicle can be a truck, because any vehicle can be used for commercial purposes. I mean, but to single out one design of a vehicle and say, oh, that's a truck, and no one else, and by default and all the other ones aren't. That's I call it discrimination. I have here's from the fire department. Now I have pictures of the local fire chief. He was issued a station wagon, and you know, it's painted red. It had, you know, fire chief on the side, the logo. But once that plate was put on a station wagon, that station wagon is no longer, well, that station wagon became a commercial vehicle. So that station wagon became a truck, a fire truck. There's a legal doctrine called the justum generis, or of the same kind. Now, when you want to create a classification, that's important. Take mammal. Mammal is the broad term for a lot of different type of animals. So a mammal is basically defined as it feeds its young milk, has fur, a few other features. Like I said, that's a broad term. I mean, humans are mammals. So are rodents, cats, dogs, elephants. But even though a cat and an elephant are mammals, they're not of the same kind. Then you have subclassifications. When it comes to a house cat, is not the same as a tiger or a lion. It's a different type. Same with dogs. You could have collies, spaniels, German shepherds, so on. But even with humans, you have the African Americans, Anglo-Saxons, Chinese, Orientals. I mean, even though an Oriental and African American are of the they're of the same kind of being humans, but they're not the same. There's a different class. Okay, where is this all leading? Okay. In the old days, they used to mark paint on the door, not for hire. Now, at one time in Pennsylvania, there was 4 types of licenses that were issued. If you were a registered owner, then you received an owner's license. If you had a family member that didn't have a car but wanted to use your vehicle, then they had to get the basic operator's license. If someone was hired to drive like a delivery truck, then they had to get the basic driver's license. And then there was subclassifications, like, for example, a taxi, a bus, and a limousine. So in the old days, a commercial driver had to be a marked vessel, just like a police officer. Now, this badge is a license. There's a number. The police officer just couldn't wear any badge. He was issued a badge, and that number was on a credential signed by the captain or the mayor. And this is the only badge he's allowed to wear, just like his firearm. If he's issued a firearm or a taser, you have serial numbers. You just can't go around using any firearm. Now, a commercial driver had to be a marked vessel. So their license was in the form of a badge worn in the cap, just like a police officer. And this is also a tax stamp. So if you were a paid driver back in the old days, every year you got a new license with a new number. That was your tax stamp. And you had to wear that. So if you were in a... Okay. So let's say under the old days, if you were driving this is a marked vessel, is a commercial vessel. So if you were going down the road and if you weren't wearing your cap with the badge on, police officer saw you, you were in big trouble. Okay, back then you could get arrested. Wasn't good enough that the vehicle was a marked vessel. If you were operating a commercial vehicle, you had to wear your badge in public display at all times. Same with a bus driver or taxi cab driver. That policy should still be used. Okay. If you were a farmer, and Joe's farm, Joe's nursery, you're growing flowers. Okay, so you have a truck, and then back in the day they didn't have a variety of vehicles as they do today. So you bought a truck, and then you say you're hauling your produce to a local store. Well, if you had a right, even though it says John's farm, you had a right on the side of the truck, not for hire, and then you didn't have to wear a cap badge. Then you were able to operate this truck as a non-commercial vehicle, and all you needed would be your operator's license or owner's license. Now, one of the reasons why they wanted to put the default classification for a pickup truck as commercial, so the police officer didn't have to use too many brain cells. It cut back on the amount of investigation that was needed. For example, today, if a truck was allowed to use a standard issue plate, lower fee, and what happens if a jobber was wanted to take supplies to a job site? So now, officer pulls over this jobber, doesn't know it's a jobber at the time, and then he sees some materials in the back. Now the officer would say, where's your bill of lading? That operator better have some paperwork for that merchandise, or the police officer is able to confiscate it. Contraband. Because who knows, that material could have been stolen. So if you don't have a bill of lading, then the material is taken to custody until proven until it's all sorted out. Now, for example, today, if you went to Lowe's, now right now the way you're looking at this truck, it's an unmarked vessel. But say this was your truck and you're coming back from Lowe's or Home Depot and you bought some materials because you're gonna either fix the porch or fix the sink, do some remodeling in the kitchen. Officer pulls you over. He notices some materials in the back. He can ask you, where's your bill of lading? Well, you have your if you bought stuff at Lowe's or Home Depot, you got a receipt. It's all like an inventory list. So the officer could look at the receipt and see if all the material matches. If you don't have that receipt, he could confiscate all that material as contraband until proven otherwise. So this is why the default status for a pickup truck is commercial, along with your driver's license. When you get pulled over, the officer's going to say, let me see your driver's license. You have to clarify, sir, I don't care what it says on that credential, but I'm not engaged in commerce right now. I'm not a paid driver. I'm just an operator. And I recommend everybody you put not for hire on the side of your vehicle. You can stencil that, because usually that's where your police officer usually stands, is that next to the driver's door. The whole method that PennDOT has used for classification, it's all jumbled up. Well, they've done it so they can maximize profit. And for a police officer, when he walks up to any vehicle, he's allowed to assume that all vehicles are engaged in commerce somehow, and all operators are drivers. This is why it's called the driver's license. The term driver has been bastardized. So where am I getting at here? Well, if I write a letter to PennDOT explaining the error of their ways, they're not going to listen to me. they're too big to fail. You got these arrogant politicians or whatever, their lofty towers. And if I said, if I file a class action, no, I couldn't go up with one man up against an army of attorneys. So maybe it's time for some civil disobedience. I said, I'm just borrowing that phrase. Now I got to show you something here. Here's a typical postal vehicle. I don't know if you can see, but there's no license plate attached in the back, but it has a hull plate number. This vehicle is a marked vessel. It's identified as a postal vehicle. Same here. This is a typical minivan used by the post office. It is now a commercial vehicle. If you take notice, there's a hull plate number, but there is no license plate attached. Here's another picture. And in Pennsylvania, these vehicles are exempt from the annual inspection and the emission sticker. So I found a loophole that became available in 1969. That a motorist, you can opt out from needing that license plate in the back. If you're allowed to put it on, you're allowed to take it off. So all you have to do is, since the vehicle was issued a VIN number, and now it's publicly displayed, because that's when the VIN plate was publicly displayed, starting in 1969. So now you could stencil the VIN plate number on both ends of the vehicle at the highest point, and then you could put the certificate of title on the window, and happy motoring. That's all you need. They don't need the plate no more. If that's proven correct, this will send shockwaves across the whole country, including Canada and Mexico. I mean, the certificate of title is issued by the Department of Transportation. It's signed by the Secretary of Transportation. It's an official document. And all that information is already in the database. So how many numbers does a vehicle need? The vehicle is issued, it's an identification number. That's a federal number. And federal numbers supersede a state number. Well, see, starting in 1920, the license plate was supposed to be a permanent plate. And then a vehicle was assigned a plate, and then it stays with the vehicle, you know, from cradle to grave, so to speak. And then again in 1954, when the VIN plate was invented, as you might comprehend the term, that's when the license plate on the back, the only number needed on that at that time was the at least 8 digits of the VIN number. Okay, VIN number. Two things. One, it's now 17 digits. It used to be 11 digits for a while, but overall, the VIN number is like several numbered sets that were like combined together and merged into one big number. So it's only about 8 of the last digits are the vehicle's serial number. Well, if the Commonwealth, starting in 1954, started putting the last 8 digits of the VIN on the plate, they're going to lose money. And then, well, what would you use for a registration credential? The certificate of title. It's the only, because that's linked to the VIN number. It's the only registration card you need. Now, some people will say, well, what if the bank held the certificate of title as collateral? There was a way around that, and I'll explain that in another video. But now, that problem is easily solved. Now, if you had a vehicle and you had the VIN number stenciled on the front and back at the highest point as far as size, well, then you can go and whatever size here is used on a postal vehicle, I guess that'd be good enough. Then you said you put the certificate of title on the window, happy motoring. Now, someone said to me, oh, you can't go around making homemade plates. Why not? Here's a precedent. A postal vehicle doesn't have a license plate. That's just stenciled hull plate numbers. There it is. And they even use a van. Furthermore, when a truck is issued a DOT number, well, that's all. PennDOT issues a number. So then you get a piece of paper with a number. Then you have to go. The registered owner has to go get a stencil kit, and then use the door skin as a metal plate, and attach the stencil numbers. That sounds like homemade to me. So here, the vehicle is issued a vehicle identification number. So you just make it bigger, stencil on both ends, just like the postal vehicle. I mean, that is the vehicle's identification number. The federal numbers supersede the state number. So this option became available in 1969. Once the federal government put that VIN plate and put it back out on the outside of the vehicle, game changer. See, the VIN plate used to be on the outside of the vehicle back in 1902. It was had a different name back then. But then the automakers were coerced to remove the plate and hide it. And that gave the Commonwealth a self-made excuse to intervene and issue the vehicle a registration number or identification number. But I'll talk about that in a different video. So I'm going to notify local authorities that I'm going to put the VIN number on, as I explained, put the certificate of title in the window, and tell them an approximate a date and approximate time. I'll be cruising around if they want to stop me. But I'm going to also give them a notice of response. They have to give a notice of response that if you think I'm doing something illegal, then you have an affirmative duty to explain why. See, lost to history that the original name of a certificate of title was a certificate of registration. And for the first 2 years between 1903 and 1904, when registration was handled at the county level, the county proprietary would issue you a placard, like heavy cardboard, and there was multiple functions. Besides being the certificate of registration, it was also the registration plate, because in bold letters or bold numbers, it listed the registration number. And it looked just like a title in the sense that it had the name, your name, it would have your name and address, the description of the vehicle, and now it's publicly displayed registration number. And that so since 1903, vehicles didn't have a windshield. Where you sat, it was open. There was no doors or a roof. So that certificate of registration was displayed on the dash. So this way here, the police officer can walk up to the vehicle and easily see the certificate of registration, and he can see who owned it. Back then, prior to 1905, the license plate had a different function. That was your actual operator's license or owner's license. And then in 1905, that's when all the shady things were done. That's when the certificate of registration was removed from public display, turned into a handheld document, and given a name change, then called the certificate of title. The license plate was repurposed as well. That was no longer your operator's license. That became a license you needed to use state property. See, from 1905 to 1918, all vehicles were state property. And I'll explain in a different video how that came about. So, if I got pulled over by a police officer because I didn't have a plate on the back, well, I mean, I'm not going around, the vehicle isn't going around naked. I have official documents from the Department of Transportation. There's the title. And it lists, so the VIN number that's listed on the title can be compared with the VIN number that's publicly displayed. And as far as my name and address, well, then the so-called driver's license, which is actually a credential, I could use it as an ID. So there's my picture, and then he could compare the name and address on the driver's license with what's on the title. The VIN number is a registration number. You see, sometimes words and phrases are often time sensitive. During the gestation period, what's growing in the womb is first called a fetus, an embryo, then called a fetus, and then after the gestation process is completed, the end result, well, it's now called a child or a baby. Because, so you don't continue to call it a fetus anymore. Well, the VIN plate is something that is attached to an unregistered vehicle at the factory. But then after the vehicle is registered and a certificate of title is issued, it becomes the RVIN plate, or vehicle or registered vehicle identification number. The certificate of title was originally called a certificate of registration, and the VIN number is a federally assigned registration number. How many numbers do you need? So the vehicle has its VIN plate it might be small, but it's a license plate. It's a registration plate, and it's riveted to the vehicle with special rivets. Well, this is why all the language in the vehicle code had to be bastardized, because the Commonwealth, they didn't want to tell you the importance of the of this VIN number or the certificate of title. Now, in 1969, that's when the VIN plate became public access. And starting in 1970, there was a message that appeared at the bottom of a certificate of title. You know what it said? It was a subliminal message: store in a safe place. Because they wanted that certificate of title out of sight and out of mind. Because they didn't want anybody connecting the dots, that if someone figured out that you could put the certificate of title back on the window, oh, well, the cat's out of the bag. And if any police officer is watching this video, don't be a coward. Don't hide behind a fake profile. Identify yourself, and then you can, cite whatever. We'll do a scenario. Say you were the one that pulled me over in this scenario. Now, here I am. I don't have a license plate in the back, and I'm using authorized paperwork, the certificate of title, and I'm invoking the federal jurisdiction with the VIN plate, what you call the VIN plate. Now, besides putting the VIN number in stencils on front and back, equal to size of what's up here, then to identify Pennsylvania as the port of registry, the Commonwealth as the port of registry, I would put PENNA, and then I would put the United States flag. Well, here's a little bit of trivia. When the VIN plate, as you comprehend it, was first attached to the vehicle in 1954, they forgot to add something. In Boston, the plate was supposed to be United States property. Well, in 1919, all vehicles became federal property from cradle to grave. You have an illusion of ownership. I explained that in a different video. Now, concerning the license plate, there's a standard issue. This is a con man's gimmick. That's all it is. The state colors is blue with gold, or blue with yellow. And I said the plate used to have PENNA, P-E-N-N-A. That was the official abbreviation for Commonwealth. That ended about 1958. This word Pennsylvania by itself, that identifies a private corporation. It's not even affiliated with the Commonwealth anymore. So why do I need a private corporation to issue the vehicle identification number when the federal government issued the VIN free of charge? Now, people just assume Pennsylvania, they're talking about the Commonwealth. Nope. For example, the Federal Reserve. There's nothing federal about the Federal Reserve. That was a name chosen for deception. Federal Reserve is a private corporation. It's a private bank affiliated with international banks that are now in control of our money supply. And in Pennsylvania, they must have at least 80 different variations of plates. $80. In fact, now, like if you had a classic car, like a 1956 Chevy, and someone was selling an old 1956 plate, and back then the plates had embossed, expired, it had expiration date, that expired. That was embossed, stamped right on the plate. So you could take an expired plate and have that as your license plate. Another con man's gimmick was this renewal sticker. I'll talk about that in a different video. But getting back to operating a vehicle with a license plate. Well, I am operating a vehicle with a license plate. It's called a VIN plate. That is a license plate. It's attached to the vehicle, but with special rivets. Now, starting in 1954, if the state would have started putting the last 8 digits of the VIN on that license plate, they'd be losing money. Well, then what would you use for a registration credential? The operator could use a certificate of title. See, starting in 2017, the state came up with a brainstorm. Now the plate of the back is a permanent plate. So now the vehicle is issued a permanent number. Well, now that's going to bite them in the rear end. Because why do I need a private corporation to issue the vehicle permanent number when the federal government already issued the vehicle permanent number? So, but anyway, I would notify local authorities of my intention, and I would give them a notice of response that they have to respond to articulate intent. And then we can go back and forth with correspondence, and after we have a nice pile of correspondence, then I'd go to the local county court and seek for a declaratory judgment. What jury trial? This has to see the light of day. This issue. If I'm blowing smoke out of the posterior end of my alimentary canal, then let me make a fool out of myself in front of a jury. But if not, could the Commonwealth take a chance to have my argument here see the light of day? Maybe it's time you should buy stock at Imodium. You can make some money. Look what's on here. It's a scam. So that's for you to decide. I've been working on this for 6 years, and I think I have my ducks in a row. I'd like to just have an open debate. But you see, that would spark curiosity, and if this information would start going viral, then what? I mean, I can't stress enough. Well, for example, that license plate. All right, in Pennsylvania, you have to get a vehicle inspected every year. Now, when you get the vehicle inspected, the inspection mechanic does not hand you the inspection sticker and say, go put it on. Likewise with the VIN plate. You as an operator, you're not allowed to, I mean, they don't send you a VIN plate in the mail and tell you here, attach it on. It's a federal offense to tamper with that VIN plate. But yet, you're allowed as an operator to attach the license plate in the back. That's telling me it's not needed. Because if it was needed, then it would be attached like the VIN plate with special rivets. So just think, when you're bending over to attach that license plate, more than the plate is getting screwed. So there's some food for thought. And can't stress enough, if you got a police officer watching this video, well, don't hide behind a fake profile. Identify yourself. And let's have a debate. I don't know what they've been teaching you at the police academy. But now, what if I'm correct? That means all the baloney you were taught in the police academy, that's what it is, baloney. You were duped. You've been taking advantage of your fellow Americans. You know what's a shame too? this private corporation called the Department of Transportation, or Pennsylvania, they've been raking in billions of dollars every year. And what do they do with the money? They don't fix the roads. The roads are getting worse. All that money is diverted, you know, to slush funds, to justify pay raises, pensions. It goes every place but where it should go. And they need the police as Ponzi's, the pawns in this money game, to go shake down a traveling motorist, grab some money, and give it to the boys. So, yes, just think if we, group of motorists got together in front of the courthouse and started burning these useless or worthless registration credentials, or just to talk about it. I mean, starting fires, and you know, then you're just giving them an excuse. But we could show videos of, I mean, we could have like a holographic image of a fire. How about that? Now, so I wouldn't recommend actually doing, you know, burning anything, because then you're just inviting trouble. So today with the computers, we could have a holographic fire, just like they had in the Wizard of Oz, you know, all that theatrics. Now, so what happens next? Is it time for civil disobedience? You know, borrowing that phrase. It's time to wake up. And so, just like I said, food for thought. Until the next video.